So a couple of years ago, we took a look at a Docker image called Invoice Ninja that we deployed in Portainer just by running a Docker, like a Docker Compose file or a stack, as Portainer likes to call them. But shortly after I released that video, the deployment process changed quite a bit, and the video that I made then very quickly became outdated. And over the course of the last year or year and a half, I've received several requests to revisit the new way to deploy Invoice Ninja in Docker. So that's what we're going to take a look at in today's video. But before we get into the actual deployment of Invoice Ninja in Docker, be sure to get subscribed if you're interested in this kind of content. I try to release a couple of videos a week, and if you're interested, definitely get subscribed. Now, with that said, I have recently received a couple of comments from people saying, hey, I didn't know you were producing content anymore because I haven't seen anything on my feed in like 9 months or more. So the best way to make sure that you get notified when I release a new video is go follow me on Twitter. That'll be linked in the description down below, along with everything related to this video. But following me on Twitter is probably the best way to get notified when I release a new video. Also, if you'd like to be able to get early access sometimes, as well as ad-free access. I know that that's going to be a big one for a lot of people. If you'd like to see my videos without ads, no YouTube ads, no baked-in ads, none of that, you can head over to Patreon or dbtech.fans. Either of those will let you get early access and, more importantly, ad-free access to my content for as little as $1 a month. If you want to pay more than that, that's great, but for $1 a month, you can get access to my content with no ads. So with all of that out of the way, let's jump over and take a look at Invoice Ninja. So as I mentioned, I originally released this video, the first version of this video, back in July of 2020, and here is the blog post regarding that. Here we can see that we used a Portainer stack or a Docker Compose file to deploy. That has changed a little bit because of just some different things. So what we're going to do is take a look at the new way to deploy this using command lines. So it's not nearly as intimidating as it might sound. We're going to go through all of the steps to get this deployed, but just so we can kind of see it in action. If we come over to here, here is Invoice Ninja up and running. I'm going to go ahead and log in with my email account there. And here it is. It's up and running. Everything is working as we would want it to work. And it really just takes a few minutes to deploy using the command line. So let's actually take a look at that now. So this is the official GitHub repository for Invoice Ninja. In the past, we used a forked version of Invoice Ninja, which was, I guess, fine. However, it's usually preferable to use the official version whenever possible. So if there are exceptions to that, I want to clarify. But usually, it's better to use the official version. Basically, we've got a Docker Compose file right here. We've also got an environment file down there below that. What we're going to do is just kind of clone this whole repository via command line, make some edits, and then deploy from there. So in order to clone this via command line, what we're going to do is come over to here. We're going to go to this drop down right here where it says code. We're just going to use the HTTPS version. That's fine. We're going to click copy just like that. And then we're going to come over to our terminal window, and we're going to minimize that in the background. And basically, let's just take a look and see what I've got in here. I'm going to call this, I'm actually going to create a new folder here just so we can clone into that folder. I've already got one for Invoice that we're actually going to use, but I want to show the process of cloning a repository here. So I'm just going to make a directory called Ninja, and then I'm going to cd into Ninja, and then I'm going to do git clone, and I'm going to paste in that URL and hit enter. And so now it's cloning into Docker files. So basically what it did, I don't actually like this. This was a little bit frustrating, but so if I do an ls, it actually moved it into Docker files as opposed to Invoice Ninja. It's just a weird little thing. I don't know why that folder is named what it is, but there you go. So if we then do a cd into Docker files and an ls, here we can see the docker-compose.yml file, as well as the env file. We're going to take a look at both of those, and then once we've taken a look at both of those, we're actually going to go back to my existing installation so that you can see what my environment file as well as my Docker-compose file look like. So let's take a look at the env file first. So we're going to do nano env, and I'm going to make this a little bit bigger, full screen here. as much as I can anyway. So at the top, again, this is where all of your environment variables are going to be stored for the sake of security rather than putting them in a Docker Compose. So we've got our environment variables here. We've got an app URL. Of course, you're going to put in whatever URL, your actual HTTPS, invoice.mydomain.com or whatever you want to put it on. You're going to put that there. We're going to put in an app key, which I'm going to show you how to generate here in just a little while. App debug equals true. If you're doing some testing, having debug equals true is fine. Once you're actually comfortable, you're ready to deploy this into production, you're going to change app_debug equals true to false. Otherwise, the dashboard's going to throw a hissy fit that you've got debug enabled. Below that, require HTTPS equals false. That should be true. You're dealing with sensitive information that you don't want people to intercept. So we want to make sure that HTTPS is set to true and that you've actually got an SSL set up on that URL. So that's what's going on there. Phantom.js PDF generation. You can set this to true or false depending on your needs. However, if you change it to true, you will need to get a Phantom.js key. There's currently one in here, but it is for very, very small requests or very few requests per IP address. So if you're going to be using a lot of this, you will want to get your own Phantom.js key for that. And then, of course, the PDF generator is Snap PDF. That's probably fine. Trusted proxies, fine. Queue connection is the database. I wouldn't mess with that. Just leave that alone. Below that, we've got a database host, port, and database information to connect. Be sure that you change the username, or at least change the password. At the very minimum, change the password for the sake of security. You don't want to leave all of this standard. So there you go. Below that, we're going to create our initial user. That's going to be our default user, our administrator. You're going to go ahead and put in an email address, whatever email address you'd like to log in with, as well as a password that you'd like to log in with. For like I showed just a minute ago when I logged into that dashboard, I set my username and password for that here. Below that, we've got some mail options for, just to send mail from your Invoice Ninja setup here. Change those appropriately, your mailer log, your host, your port, username, password, encryption, that sort of thing. Make sure that you set all of this appropriately for your setup. Also, just as a preface here, when we actually switch over and look at my configuration, I'm just going to leave all of that in there. I don't care. I'm using an app password that I'm going to revoke before this video goes live. So if you see passwords in my actual environment file, it's fine. It's not going to work by the time you view this video. So there's that. Below this, we've got some MySQL stuff here as well. Of course, you'll want to change those as necessary. And then some v4 environment variables. That is for version 4. We're on version 5 at this point, so just leave that alone. But that's what the environment variable or the environment file looks like for this. So I'm just going to exit out of there. I'm also going to do a nano Docker Compose like so. And this is the default Docker Compose file for this setup. At the top, they've got the version 3.7. That's fine. Services. We've got a server. We're actually using Nginx as the server for this. And there are some options in here for some different configs. I should back up though. Our image is Nginx. Our restart policy is always. That's good. Our environment file is just env. That's the file that we just looked at. That's where all of our credentials and that kind of stuff are stored. So that's what's going on there. We've got a vhost configuration. If you wanted to use Caddy, you could uncomment that and configure that as necessary. We're not going to do that though. Below that, of course, we've got a config for Nginx and a config for the Docker app public for Nginx so that it can kind of do what it needs to do there. Depends on app. We'll get to app in just a moment. The port by default is set to 80. If you need to change that, you can. Just make sure that you only change the first half of that. Don't change anything after the colon there. If you wanted to, you could enable port 443 and change, again, the first half if you needed to do that. And of course, if you did that, you'd want to uncomment there. The networks that we're going to put all of this on a single network just for easier communication between the different containers. So that we're just going to have an Invoice Ninja network. We've got extra hosts. You can put this in here if you want. I actually took it out of mine and it works just fine. So you can kind of do with that as you want. Again, I will be showing my Docker Compose here in just a moment, but I wanted to show the default, what you get when you clone their repository. Again, we've got our app our image version here, or our image is Invoice Ninja version 5. We can see that at the end right there. That's our version 5 that we're using. Again, our env file is right there. It's called env. Restart always. Again, all of our stuff for our config, for our hosts, app public, app storage, all of that is mapped. You can change where you map these things if you need to do that. But that's kind of what's going on there. Again, I will show the differences in mine here in a moment. Again, this depends on the database to be up and running first, which is good. You always want your database up and running first to deploy an app so that it can do what it needs to do. Again, we're on the Invoice Ninja network, the extra host. Again, I took all of that out of mine and it works just fine. So we're going to keep scrolling down to the database there. So again, our image is MySQL version 5. They've got some additional information here about using different architectures like ARM or whatever. You can kind of read through those notes if that applies to you. Again, our port is 3306 is the typical port for a MySQL database. They've mapped it to 3305. I guess in case you've already got something on 3306. It shouldn't matter though, because you're going to be on your own network. So change that as you need to. Again, the restart policy is always the environment file is env, and we've got a volume for the MySQL data. Of course, you can map that wherever you need to map it for your configuration. There's some additional stuff in here. If you want to do auto SQL backups, you should always have a good backup solution in place. That's why I do most of my important Docker containers in a Proxmox configuration with a Proxmox backup server, so that they just run daily backups of everything. And then if something goes wrong, I can just redeploy that entire container, that entire instance of that container. So that's kind of why I use Proxmox for my important stuff. It's a better backup solution. And then everything below this, again, we're on the Invoice Ninja network, and again, that extra hosts I removed. And then everything below that is for version 4. Don't need it in version 5, so that's good to go. So we've kind of taken a look at the default setup for this. With that said, let's actually go and take a look at my customized, for me anyway, my customized Docker Compose that I've actually deployed that is up and running currently. So here is my env file for the one I deployed that we just logged into a minute ago. And basically you can see that I've added my app URL, I've added an app key, we will take a look at that. I've also changed the app debug from true to false, the require HTTPS from false to true, and the Phantom JS PDF generation from true to false, just because those were the settings I needed for my setup. Of course, you'll want to adjust those for your setup. And then, of course, I didn't change the usernames and passwords and all that kind of stuff. Again, I do encourage you to do that. I just left this all default, just for easy deployment for demonstrative purposes. I will say that below that, my Invoice Ninja username and password, those are the ones that you actually log into Invoice Ninja with as the administrative user. You probably shouldn't use that for your daily, your daily invoicing and things like that. But this is how you would log in, at least the first time, to configure things and get things up and running for production use. Below that, we've got our mail options. Again, like I said, I'm going to leave all of this so that you can see it. That is an app password from my Google Apps account or my Gmail, whatever the new Google Business Suite is. They change their names so often I can't keep track, but that's an app password. They've left that naming scheme alone, but that'll be gone by the time this video goes up, so no worries there. And of course, you can see my smtp.gmail, my mail port, my username, my password. Mail encryption is TLS, my from address, my from name, all of that's in there. And of course, the MySQL stuff, you can change that as well. So that's kind of what's going on there. The app key that we've got up here, let me actually take a quick look at how to generate that so that we can kind of show that process. It's actually really easy. What I'm gonna do, I'm just gonna exit out of there. So what we're gonna do is just paste this in here. Basically, it is a Docker run. We're going to remove it once it's done. This is just to throw up a key that we need. But basically, we're gonna use the Invoice Ninja app, the PHP artisan key generate show, hit enter. We'll give this a second to do what it needs to do, and then we'll get a key that we can take a look at here. There it is, base 64, and then a bunch of characters and an equal sign. And that's it. So if we were to actually go back in and take a look at that env file, of course, that's a different key, but you can see that's what it looks like. That's what you should put in that app key, is that entire string from base 64 all the way to the equal sign. That's what goes in that spot. So just wanted to show that. Again, all of this will be linked in the description down below so that you can take a look at deploying this for yourself. Now, with that said, let's actually take a look at my Docker Compose. There are some things in here that I changed, obviously, like I mentioned, as far as removing some of that extra networking stuff with the IP addresses and the URLs, things like that. I didn't need to map any of that for my setup. You may need to, but I took it out and it works just fine for me. So what we're going to do is nano docker compose. So basically nothing in here changed until we get down to the ports for this server. Again, this was 8080. I changed it to 801080, like so. And then I ran into an issue when I deployed where there were some, it wasn't able to create the files and folders that it needed to, and it just kept throwing an error. It wouldn't deploy, but it's there. It's not going to hurt anything to have that there. Of course, if you want to leave those there, you'll want to make sure that they are the same for, or that they're correct for your instance. We've talked about PUID and PGID in several videos, but if you're not sure how to get those, we're gonna say no to that. What you're gonna do is just type in ID space and then whatever username you log in to administer your server with. Don't use root. I want to be very clear. Don't use root. Root is not something that you give Docker images permission to use. So when I log into Open Media Vault, that's the system that I'm currently logged into. I log in as admin. So I'm going to do ID space admin, like so, and I'm going to hit enter. UID and GID are 998 and 100 respectively. So that's where I got those. You know, like if I was to log in, or I wanted to get the UID and GID of my user account, if I were to log into Ubuntu, you know, I might do something like ID space DB tech. If I do that now, it's going to throw an error because there's no such user, but you're just going to use whatever user you use to log into your server, right? Again, don't use root. So that's where I got the UID and GID. Go ahead and put them in there if you want to. If you don't, if it doesn't work for you, if you don't need it, fine. No big deal. Okay, so once we have our Docker Compose file the way we want it and our env file the way we want it, of course, our next steps are to do docker compose up-d and hit enter. And it's going to go ahead and build everything it needs, or it's going to pull and build and all of that kind of stuff. Once it's done, we're going to start seeing, you know, creating, done, creating, done, creating, done. Once it's done with all of that, we're actually going to jump over to Portainer just so we can kind of take a look at some of the logs that are in there to find out why our app isn't deploying properly.
A few moments later.
Okay, so all of that's up and going. So we're going to come back over to here. We're going to refresh this. And here are the ones we deployed specifically for this instance. So I'm going to go ahead and open up all of the different logs for these 3 containers that we've got running right here. Over here, we've got the server, and it says that it has started a worker process, so that's good. That means that that container is up and running appropriately. Here we've got our database saying, hey, there's an empty password here. You should probably switch that. But again, this is up and working. And then if we look here, this is the actual app, and here we can see that var www app storage app permission denied. So what we want to do is actually come back over to our command prompt, to our terminal here. We're going to do an ls, and we're going to take a look and see what we can find as far as what the issue might be here. So here we can, so what I've done is I've switched over to cd docker. Let me actually make that bigger so that it's easier to read there. And then we're going to cd into app. And right there, we've got public and storage. So we're going to do, what we want to actually do, I think, is do chmod recursive of 7755. So what we want to do here is actually, we're going to chmod the folder, or the folders here. So we're going to do chmod. We're going to do it recursively just so that it can apply all of the permissions to subfolders and things like that. We're going to do 755. That's a very standard permissions to give there. And we're just going to say, we'll do app and hit enter. And hopefully, here in just a minute, this will change. Okay, and after changing the permissions of the app folder to 755, you may have to tweak yours a little bit depending on your setup, but here we can see that it actually initialized the Invoice Ninja, and now it's going through and actually populating the database with the information that it needs to have all of the tables and that sort of thing for the app to work. So at this point, it's just a matter of waiting for the database to populate, this will probably take a while. I think it took me about my setup about 10 minutes to go through this and populate that database. So just kind of something to keep in mind there. But once this is done, you can then go over to your domain name, wherever you've got that set up and configured here. You can go there, log in, and start using Invoice Ninja again, the way you could way back in the day a couple of years ago, but actually using the official Invoice Ninja Docker image for this, and of course, all of the perks that go along with the official images. So guys, there you go. There is how to deploy the official Invoice Ninja Docker image using command line after cloning a repository. I know that a lot of times we try to do this stuff in Portainer. That's not always an option, or not a feasible, easy to do option. And I think this was actually pretty straightforward. Hopefully I made the video easy to understand. If you found the video helpful, do me a favor, give the video a thumbs up. It really does help out more than you might realize. Again, as I mentioned, everything will be linked in the description down below, including a couple of ways you can not only support the channel, but get ad-free access to my content when it comes out. Again, follow me on Twitter if you'd like to make sure that you get notified when I release new videos. But I think with all that said, I'm going to wrap this up. I want to thank you guys for spending a few minutes of your day with me today, and I will talk to you in the next video.